Hello, my name is Jacob Summerville, and I am a second-year Luther student pursuing my MA with a focus in justice and reconciliation. My topic for this class and my eventual capstone is that of Christian nationalism. So let's get into it. As a bit of a disclaimer, Christian nationalism is an issue worldwide, but today I will be focusing exclusively on Christian nationalism as it relates to the United States. Every country handles the church differently. Some countries, worship is simply not allowed, and in other countries, there is a state church. But we fall somewhere in the middle, and to try to cover the Christian nationalism, the idea of Christian nationalism on a global scale would take a long time. So to keep the focus more tight and keep the conversation more focused, I will be focusing exclusively on the United States. So before we really get into it, I think it's important to establish what Christian nationalism is. And as a basic definition, it's the idea that America is a Christian nation, that it was founded as a Christian nation, and that active steps should be taken to merge American and Christian identities on a national level. It's not really a wholly religious or political movement, but it is a combination of the two. And this is very important to keep in mind because Christian nationalism is not Christianity. And although it is a predominantly right-wing movement, it is not the right-wing movement. There are people on the right wing of American politics that do not believe in Christian nationalism. There are Christians that certainly do not believe in it either. It is not one or the other. It is a twisted combination of the two. It is also reflective and prescriptive. So as I said, it is the idea that America is a Christian nation right now and that it should stay that way, but also that it was founded as a Christian nation. It reflects back on our history as a quote unquote Christian nation. And it also gives policies and ideas to keep it that way. There are several principles that really guide the Christian nationalist movement, and there are 7 of them here. Across all of my sources, these were the big ones. And as I said earlier, America in the minds of these people was founded as a Christian nation. They also believe that America is chosen by God and is therefore exceptional. This point in particular has been used to really do a lot of terrible things and justify them under the idea of American exceptionalism. This is a cornerstone belief of the Christian nationalist ideal. They also believe that Christians are the only group that should dictate and preserve national heritage. And so you hear the phrase, history is written by the winners. They would prefer if Christians were always those winners. They also believe that Christians should have special privileges that other religions do not, and we'll get into those in a bit, but that Christians should enjoy legal and societal protections that others do not as well. And these are 2 quite different points. In addition, believers in other religions in the minds of Christian nationalism are not considered to be wholly American, because if America is a Christian nation, if the church is America, then those that believe in other religions are, in a sense, co-signing a different national belief. And so they can't be considered wholly American under this belief system. And finally, this is important, in their minds, Christians have been and currently are persecuted in the United States. And these are through various things. I'm sure many of you have heard this in the news, but policies such as having to bake a cake for an LGBTQ plus couple. That is one predominant example in the past several years here of a time when Christians have been persecuted. We've seen in response to that specific case, a lot of religious liberty laws, as though Christianity is not allowed to be practiced in this nation. It is. Christians are not persecuted, but this is an essential principle to the Christian nationalist movement. Getting into the history a little bit, as I said in the last slide there, Christianity or Christian nationalism has been used to justify the extermination of indigenous people. It's been used to justify slavery, as well as the oppression of many other groups. For example, Irish, Italian, Chinese, Jewish, and Muslim people throughout history, from the 1800s, from before the founding of our nation even, all the way through to the 2000s post 9/11. This idea became even more solidified in response to the Soviet Union during the Cold War, because the Soviet Union was pretty strictly not religious. And so to differentiate ourselves from them as much as possible, and to galvanize public support for the Cold War, these policies that we'll get into in a second here for Christian nationalism were really, really pushed hard during the 50s and the 60s during the Cold War, to try to really, really separate ourselves from the Soviet Union. The most recent example that I can think of Christian nationalism was the Capitol riot. And as a disclaimer, going forward from this point in the presentation, there will be a lot of photos that will be shown of the Capitol riot, because Christian nationalism was a cornerstone of that riot. It was used to flare up tensions in those right-wing groups, to galvanize their beliefs and to push them toward the violence that happened that day. So if that is a topic that makes you uncomfortable, if seeing pictures of that triggers anything for you, just as a disclaimer, there will be plenty of that moving forward. Why is this a problem? Obviously, as recent as the early 2000s, Christian nationalism was used to push down a lot of other groups, and it is inherently exclusionary. Because if you are saying that America is a Christian nation, anyone that does not fit that mold cannot be considered American. It is inherently very, very exclusionary. And it often goes hand in hand with other forms of nationalism, chiefly white nationalism. This is a very, very white movement, not exclusively, but very predominantly. It is also openly harmful to women, queer folks, and non-Christians, as well as immigrants in some cases. And this is through both religious and political policies, as we said earlier. It also pushes those on the margins of society further away from the church. So people like women, queer folks, non-Christians, immigrants, people that really do deserve a place, a seat at the table of the church, are being pushed farther and farther away from it by these policies. And what are those policies, you may ask? Well, there are many, but these are the main ones to kind of keep an eye out for. First, there are blue laws. These are laws that are made exclusively to limit the amount of things people can do on Sundays other than go to church. So if a business is closed by a government mandate on Sundays, if school sports are not allowed to happen on Sundays, these are policies that would be considered blue laws. Obviously, anti-abortion and anti-women's healthcare in general policies are quite Christian nationalist. The idea of Christian iconography in public spaces, I believe it was Alabama that has a plaque with the 10 Commandments outside of their government center, outside of their capital. And this has been pushed for to be kept there by Christian nationalist advocacy groups. The idea of prayer in public schools is a very, very prominent one right now. Any policy that is anti-LGBTQIA+ would be considered Christian nationalist. The Declaration of America as a Christian nation is something that some of these organizations are pushing for. And it seems to be the end goal of many of these organizations, although not explicitly. And finally, abstinence-only education is another big policy that a lot of these groups are pushing for. In addition to this, just the limiting of science in schools, a lot of anti-evolution, and a lot of just anti-truth, I guess, in schools. Critical race theory is another target of a lot of these advocacy groups. And that is, all of these really are with the end goal of eventually declaring America as a Christian nation, and in all public spheres, whether it be schools, whether it be workplaces, anything like that, having Christianity be the overriding moral compass, or what they consider to be Christianity. Organizations to look out for are the Alliance Defending Freedom, Christian Liberty Party, the Focus on the Family organization, the Foundation for Moral Law, the First Liberty Institute, the Lord's Day Alliance, and the National Reform Association. There are many more than this, but these are the big ones. So keep an eye out for these organizations and for anything they might do. Whoever they might promote as a political candidate or whatever policies they promote are probably something you should be pushing back on if you are against Christian nationalism. A lot of these take the guise of advocacy groups, charities, political parties even, but at their core, they hold these Christian nationalist beliefs, and that is really their end goal here. What to look out for? There, as I said, a lot of these organizations do a lot of what they do in secret. A lot of their Christian nationalist action takes the form of political donations, of legislation pushing, of lobbying. But there are some things out in the public sphere that you can keep an eye out for. And these are terms like heritage, tradition, values, and patriotism. On their own, these words are not bad things. In fact, they are quite good. But from organizations like these and politicians like Donald Trump, like Mitch McConnell, like so many others, these words often are used as dog whistles when what they really mean to say is explicitly Christian nationalist. So keep an eye out for these and keep an eye out on who is saying them and in what context. Keep an eye out for action on behalf of Christian nationalist organizations. And as I said, a lot of these just take the form of lobbying and political donations, but those are public record. So although you would have to do some digging for it, try to keep an eye out for any public statements, any organizations that are funded by these organizations, and steer clear of those things or push back against those policies. Keep an eye out for the use of Christian and American interchangeably. This is used far more often than I was even aware of until I started research for this project. And keep an eye out for bills that limit the freedoms of marginalized groups, particularly women, LGBTQIA+, immigrant, and non-Christian populations. And some actionable steps forward. This is a complicated and nuanced issue, and there is no one solution, but there are some things we can do. First, and as is true with so many of these complicated issues, call your legislators. Voice your opinions on Christian nationalist policies, even if they aren't happening in your state. Like, for example, SB 8, the Texas abortion ban, which is just a huge topic of discussion right now. Also, Title 42, which is the policy down at the border that is being used to expel immigrants under the guise of COVID protection. It was a Trump-era policy that Biden has received a lot of pressure to overturn, but he has not done that yet. This is extremely harmful to predominantly people of color, and especially people at our southern border. So definitely call and push back against that one. And then Project Blitz is another policy that has been done by many of these Christian nationalist organizations that we just talked about. And this is just a huge push of Christian nationalist bills and legislation that are trying to be pushed through almost all 50 states right now in a huge, huge blitz. There are hundreds of these small bills that are going through with the hopes that any of them will stick and form just a precedent in the law or a foothold for these organizations to start moving forward with larger policies. So feel free to look that up. I could do a whole 20-minute presentation on just that. It is a huge thing. Also, directly address Christian nationalism in your own congregations. This, as I said, is not wholly political. It is a religious thing as well. And to really curb Christian nationalism, it is important that we address the Christian part of that name as well. So in no uncertain terms and from the voice of church leaders, condemn Christian nationalism. Explicitly lay out what it is and why it is a problem and why it is not biblical. We are called to love each other, to welcome each other, and this idea flies in the face of all of that. So confront it directly in your congregations. And lastly, we can properly educate those around us through things like comprehensive sex education in our schools, through critical race theory, and through interfaith exposure, exposing especially young people to people of other religions or lack thereof, and showing them what those people are really like, what their belief systems actually entail, is a great way to start curbing Christian nationalism. This is a growing problem. This is something that is not going to go away on its own. And so as faith leaders, it is on us to enter our communities, whether those are political or faith-based, and really take action directly to stop Christian nationalism. Thank you.